kings of Europe decided, you know what, there's this huge piece of land just across the Atlantic Ocean, let's go get it. And so how they did it though is they chartered corporations. You know, the king set up a corporation and it was funded by the king and bankers and that kind of stuff, and they came over and they stuck the flag into the ground and say, you know, we claim this for the King of England, and set up shop and started dealing with the First Nations people that are here. And you know, I'm not going to go into all the atrocities that happened. Literally millions of First Nations people died, either as a result of disease, wars, starvation, and so that genocide took place just so that they can colonize this land. You know, it's a sad chapter in our history, but we also have to recognize that that's the past, and so let's move on and let's try to live in harmony with one another now without pushing our will against another, and try to come to terms with the things that were done in the past. It was essentially the corporation that came and conquered this country, or this land, I should say, not the country. They came and conquered this land. It was all corporations that came. Now that those corporations are here, people started coming over and started immigrating to what they thought was Canada or the United States. And then in 1867 they passed this thing called the British North America Act. Now, did the people here vote on this? No. This is a piece of legislation from Great Britain. That's all this is. The BNA Act is just legislation from the Parliament in Great Britain. But it was passed off on us as a constitutional document. In order for you to have a constitution, the people have to vote on the document, not the representatives in the legislature. This document merged all of the colonies into one colony called Canada. That's all this document did. But it was passed off as forming a country. The people of Great Britain went and started traveling around the world and bringing their legal system with them. And even though the US declared their independence in 1776, they still based their legal system on British system. They're all based on that common law system, but there's also the Admiralty system that came with it. Representatives from, you know, Canada, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, you know, all those got together with Great Britain and started talking about, okay, how can we really set things up so that we can be autonomous from Great Britain? And so they actually met for a couple years, 1926 and 1930, to formulate how this was going to work. And then the king then passed the Statute of Westminster, and that essentially broke the tie between Great Britain and Canada. Okay, the king is no longer a part of Canada. Canada is no longer affected by any statutes or regulations from Great Britain. Because the link to the crown was broken, technically we are in anarchy. We have no document to actually set up the framework for how our government is supposed to operate in this land. In 1947, they wrote a letters patent creating the office of Governor General. The Governor General is the head of this country.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications.
There's not one piece of territory or one thing of a monetary nature that we want out of this war. We want peace and prosperity for the world as a whole.
Let's go through these words and let's see if you understand them now. Okay? Governor General. What's a general? Military. Lieutenant. More generals. What's a company? It's like 4 brigades of man and heavy equipment. An officer. Okay? The taxpayer is actually an officer who holds an office. Commission. How many here work for commission under a social insurance number? So you're actually a commissioned officer. Okay, so even some of the financial terms have military connotations. And it's all done under admiralty, which is military. When you turn 18 and you start working under a social insurance number or accept the birth certificate, you're actually accepting being posted at a military post, evidenced by a name, address, and a date of birth. Because what was birthed? The vessel, right? It's a military vessel. So when you agree to be the legal representative of that military vessel, you agree to be manning that military post. Okay, that's why they need the name and birth date, so that they can prove that you're a private in their military. All of these documents, whether you're registering property or applying for driver's licenses, a birth certificate, all that kind of stuff, it's all in the public, which means it's all on the military side, and you're holding military offices when you have these documents on your possession. As long as you're manning a military post, technically you're at war. So, Clause 1 says, "We do hereby constitute." Who's we? I don't remember seeing any documentation that said the people of this land gave them permission to constitute that office. And the king doesn't have any authority here because the Statute of Westminster 1931 cut off all of that. So I have a question. Who's we? I suspect that it was Prime Minister Mackenzie King and all of his cronies. So how did all this happen? This guy here, our Prime Minister, Mackenzie King, I did some reading on him, and I found out he's actually really good friends with John D. Rockefeller Jr. And he actually spent a lot of time in New York. He actually consulted with him. Mackenzie King's a lawyer, and he was actually Rockefeller's lawyer, and actually helped him out with a lot of labor disputes that are happening in the States. So who signed it? Prime Minister of Canada. So our Prime Minister signed letters patent to create the office of Governor General. They needed to set up another office, so the Prime Minister did it. And I'm really curious to find out who was supporting him to do that. Because it wasn't the people, and it wasn't the king. Even though he said by His Majesty's command. I question that too. Governor General's Act. You go to Canadian government website and you can actually look up the acts. Okay, you look up the Governor General's Act. And in there, Clause 1, or Clause 2 says, the Governor General of Canada or other Chief Executive Officer, CEO. CEOs are for companies. Or administrator carrying on the Government of Canada on behalf and in the name of the sovereign, by whatever title designated is a corporation sole. Okay, a corporation sole is a corporation, except that there's only one individual that holds that title or owns that corporation. Corporation soles actually are used all over the place. The Pope, the office of the Pope is a corporation sole. The office of the King is a corporation sole. The Governor General, Lieutenant Governors, the Catholic Church, all of their bishops and archbishops and cardinals, they all hold corporation soles.